back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello and welcome back. I'm Dr. Rita Louise. This is Just Energy Radio. Thank you all for staying tuned to the second hour of the show. This hour, we're going to be speaking with a good friend, Dannion Brinkley, about 2012 and the changing face of time. But don't forget, Just Energy Radio is brought to you by SoulHealer.com and the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. And please do check out the Just Energy Radio webpage. That's www.justenergyradio.com, where you can get access to our over 5 years of archives, including other interviews we've done with Dannion in the past. And you can also sign up for our weekly newsletter where you can keep informed of all the great guests we have coming up. So let me tell you a little bit about Dannion and get him on the air, because I'll tell you what, he's a hoot. Dannion's name became a household word when his first of 2 New York Times best-selling books, Saved by the Light and At Peace in the Light, were published by Harper Collins in 1994. Subsequently, the Fox network quickly produced a highly acclaimed made-for-television movie depicting Dannion's story of being struck by lightning and his 28-minute death experience in heaven. The movie, also entitled Saved by the Light, aired in 1995 and became one of the highest-rated TV movies in television history. Today, Dannion and his wife work ceaselessly to champion the virtues of ethical consciousness in daily life. So please welcome to Just Energy Radio, Dannion Brinkley. Hey, Dannion, how are you doing?
Hey, Rita, how are you? That was a great interview with Michael.
Thank you. He's a cool guy. He's really smart.
He's fabulous, and he's getting mystical. That's the part I like.
Oh, the stuff that he puts out, like as far as his books, well, actually, no, some of his books get into very mystical stuff, but no, he has a very mystical part that he kind of keeps a little bit of a secret, in my opinion.
Well, he kept it well hidden for the first 10 or 12 years, but, you know, you watch, the more you uncover about ancient or forbidden archaeology, and then the more that you realize that it's a part of being accepted if you don't expose it. And then the more you start to contemplate and the better you see that the system seeks to hide it, the more mystical you become. I mean, I'm that way about death, Rita. You know, first you hear all those stories, and then you have what they call death happen to you, and you realize that everything you've ever been told is a lie. Then where do you go?
Well, it seems like everywhere, everything that's on our planet, except for me and you, and Michael, of course, you know, is a lie.
Well, so much of it, even today, you know, but you know what Blog Talk Radio and what your show is, and what the internet has done. It has opened up a whole new world that is the quiet revolution. It's much like the Mayan prophecy. You know, the big deal about 2012 and the Maya is the beginning of a new period, the end of an old, but the beginning of a new one. So we were in the galactic period, and the galactic period states that all things not done in integrity would collapse. Okay, now this is from the Dresden Codex. And so guess what? Religions, institutions, governments, everything, banks, everything has collapsed that wasn't done in integrity. Fractal banking, the whole world about whether there is extraterrestrial life, all that stuff has gone by the wayside. Anybody who doesn't believe that there are extraterrestrial or probable interdimensional beings has made a serious mistake in their calculations about reality.
But those people find themselves stuck in their dogma and are unwilling to open their minds to other possibilities.
Well, if the Maya are true, and I'm now in my 42nd year of studying the Maya, and, you know, people say, well, Dannion, why did you? Well, it's easy, Rita. When you get struck by lightning and you don't have a choice but to accept the spiritual identity and reality of we as energetic, powerful, and mighty spiritual beings, the first thing you do is you go back through your life and you hunt something that you hope would have allowed you to become as divinely aware of who you are without having to go through something like being dead. And so mine was the 68 Olympics when between boxing and track and field they had swimming. And in 1968, as a certified Southern prick, I had no interest in swimming and diving. So they said, let's go see the pyramids. Well, the pyramids were only in Egypt. And I went to Teotihuacan, and it changed my whole world. And then I spent the next 2 months, roaming Mesoamerica, looking at Mayan pyramids and looking at Mayan structure and realizing that these structures are in existence. And then I became a pyramid freak. I've been everywhere they have pyramids. Everywhere. I haven't been to the new one in Bosnia, but I'm planning to go there. But when you start to look at this, you discover that there was a reality that exists, and I always just laugh, Rita. 2 hours from Houston, everything you've ever believed about anthropological archaeology disappears in 5 minutes when you go to Teotihuacan or you go into Mesoamerica, which is now called Central America. So if the Maya are correct, we are moving into what's called the universal period. That means everything will have a form and a way to connect. The next 51 years in the Mayan calendar is about the rise of the power of the feminine. So women will become more powerful and more recognized as guides, and so I think that will be reflected in war. But when you start to realize that when this Mayan calendar was supposedly created, it basically structured on the Olmec tradition, they would have never heard of the Internet in 3114 BC, which was 6,000 years ago. They would never heard of it. But today, in the Bible it says in the end times the Antichrist will be able to speak to the entire world. Well, that sounded crazy until you realize that he can tweet you today.
YouTube it.
Or Facebook, the second largest country in the world, is 900 million people on Facebook. And soon,
wow.
I hope Satan has a Facebook page.
No, he has a like page, not a friend page, but a like page.
Yeah. Well, I'll be definitely interested in him. I can't wait to see those horns and that tail and those hooves.
Well, they talk about Satan and they talk about, Christ returning, but in today's day and age, it seems like, if someone came back and said, I'm Jesus or I'm the Messiah, they would just lock them up. I mean, their strategy and their tactics.
I'll put them on Paxo, but, if he walks across the Dead Sea, then they'd have a tendency to have to second-guess the position. But then you have people like David Copperfield and Chris Angel, and they'll come up with a way that it had to be an illusion. And so what has to happen is those isolated, some mythologies and some fact-based reality really has to be looked at. When you look at the Jewish tradition has no J's. So how could somebody named Jesus has existed as Jewish, as a Hebrew, a Palestinian Hebrew to be exact? And so how would you look at that? Well, Jesus, that name Jesus, didn't appear until 1678 when King James had the Bible translated from Latin into English. So this person that we keep describing and talking about didn't have a name that is recognized as until 300 years ago. And I think that what's really important in all of this is to take a good look at these theories. We all have to stop, put our faith aside, and look at our reality so we can find belief systems. Look at this. Everybody in the world believes there is life after death, except those people who've never paid any attention to it or who could not scientifically understand it. But the advancements of scientific technology has allowed millions and millions and millions of us to return to this earth with basically the same story. It's about compassion and about understanding. So if we all become connected, and you know what's really funny, Rita, about the whole thing about all being connected? It's not that we can talk to each other on the telephone. It's that scientists have discovered a product, a substance called dark matter. And dark matter represents the energetic pattern that the entire universe is suspended in. And I guess that's a wonderful name for God. But dark matter is proven, and right now the Higgs boson particle is trying to be discovered, or they know it exists, but they're trying to be able to replicate it in the CERN laboratories of the Collider in Switzerland. So we can now today, unequivocally and without question, scientifically prove that we are all completely connected, that there is no separation between us and Jupiter, us and the next galaxy, okay, us and the next galaxies in the universe, and the Galileo satellite and the Hubble telescope and the Galileo telescope satellite taking photographs of the known universe estimates to be 101 billion galaxies, consisting of between 1 and 11 billion planets and stars per galaxy of that 100 billion galaxies. Anyone to think that we are alone, theoretical probability makes that an insane estimation. And so when you look at what the Maya believe, and you look at the transitions that come about based on what science can prove and replicate, most of those theories that people have postulated their belief system don't hold water. So I think it's thrilling that somewhere long ago that the Maya and so many cultures understood this. You know, if you ask a Maya where do they think they came from, they all think they came from Venus. And so when you start to look at this from a point of view, you have to stop and appreciate. We're only now catching up to what we once already knew.
I totally agree with that, and I say that all the time. It's like, you know, if you really want to find out about what we really know and what the universe is about and where we come from, go to a metaphysical bookstore or read some mythology, because it provides us with so much more information about our subtle nature, our long-lost historical part that has just been tossed away in a garbage can as being science fiction, which now they're finding is fact.
Well, when you look at pyramids, give it a break. And then you look at ley lines, which are scientific. You can photograph these things from the Schumann resonance from a satellite. NASA does it all the time. And these pyramids are structured, these edifices are structured on ley lines. I'll tell you something that's really funny that I have to, it makes you think twice. There is a temple site, a Mayan temple site, which is pre-classic. I am a big, strong pre-classic Mayan supporter. I'm not a classic or a post-classic period, because that evolution gets a little muddled. But if you look at the pre-classic period like Uxmal, which is right on the Guatemalan Mexican border, there is a city, there is a temple that's in a province just below Kashmir, which is the Indian and I think it's Kashmir, between India and Pakistan, what's called Kashmir. They have an identical, completely identical structure that you would not know the difference with whether you were in Uxmal in Central America or whether you were in the jungles of India, except for the screaming monkeys. India has screaming monkeys, and Mexico doesn't. But the point is the point that
are you talking about Go ahead.
But the point that's the most interesting about it is in that particular region, they speak a dialect of ancient Maya. So how did that happen? So
the Spanish didn't get to them?
Well, I think that there has to be a common source. There has to be a common origin for all of us. And, this I keep looking and studying. That's why I like to listen to Michael's stuff. You look at this, and you have to come to a conclusion that basically everything that you're taught archaeologically and anthropologically cannot be true. Look at the Clovis theory. The Clovis theory was some Mongolians came across the Bering Strait, came down through Canada, and migrated all the way to Chile 25,000 years ago, and that's how the inhabitants of what the red man became. That's why they have certain slanted eyes, the way they describe the Indian as opposed to the Mongolian. But in the last 20 years, they have revised that 14 times, and now it's 250,000 years ago, and they cannot find the genetic coding of the Mongolian inside the native nation's red man. I don't like to call them Indian, but they cannot find the genetic coding that maps those. So all of a sudden, this historical, anthropological, archaeological concept about who we are and where we came from and blah, 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 is now scientifically not only improbable, but DNA and RNA genetically impossible.
And I just find that so refreshing to hear and find out. Like the Bosnian pyramids, I find them fascinating, but science doesn't even want to recognize them. I just saw recently they did a show on Göbekli Tepe, which I was shocked to see that on TV, although they minimized any of the real significance of it.
Well, Sam
and of course it was a ritual site, but that's a different story.
But they ran out of water. But Sam is doing a terrific job in Bosnia. He's doing a terrific job, and this light, they can now. I haven't seen this, so I can't speak as reportedly replicable in this because I have not seen it. But I've talked to Sam, and Meg Blackburn has spent some time with them, and that there is this stream of light that that has been photographed by the space station. Okay, and you always look at what pyramids were as balancing and ways to keep the planetary level of influence, and why they were built and the way they were constructed. And so if you have to accept that there is the largest pyramid on the earth is a hill in Bosnia, then what happens to history, period? It goes to hell. Okay, and so once that these experts have to accept the fact, the earth is not flat anymore, and that this thing that is covered with dirt, it would be the oldest of the pyramids, it would be the largest. What gets me, Rita, is this. It would be so easy with a NASA satellite to shoot an infrared gamma spectrum shot of this pyramid so that they could see what was under the dirt. Okay? It would be so easy for this to happen. Okay? But they don't. Or they did, well, wait a minute, or they did and won't tell you. Because I saw propaganda, and, I believe some of what I hear, but not a lot of it. But someone was saying that, and this is a NASA scientist, that said they had photographed it, and it was built the same way as Teotihuacan, except larger.
Sorry, just makes me laugh.
Yeah, I mean, why would they not photograph it, put it on the air, and debunk? Why would they not do it? Because what would happen is what this NASA scientist says that they will find. Now, that's when it all gets interesting. Okay, and I just think that we're living in a time period where the mechanical science is capable. You know, you can now hollow out a bone of a dinosaur and tell you the week that he died, 168 million years ago, based on the mitochondrial DNA. And you can tell what he ate his entire life. So when you see that these things are not occurring, there is no question it's not occurring because somebody doesn't want us to know the truth. And that's not a conspiratorial perspective. And that's not even a rationale. That is accepted dogma. I mean, this is accepted. And so why do
But don't you see that as somebody somewhere trying to enact a level of control on us and our thoughts and our beliefs?
Exactly.
I mean, skip dogma. It just seems like it takes it to a different level entirely.
I agree. But it's based in that. If you watch, you know, what's always amazing to me is because we have cable, and which is a very prejudiced and biased news cycle too. But everybody reports the same news. You can go through ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox News, and within a minute and a half of each one doing a segment, the next one does the same segment. They only report certain news, and they only replicate it over and over, which is for all of us I was in the Marine Corps, we know that's a conditioned, disciplined response to set up a rhetorical pattern of acceptance of something or a belief system of that acceptance that fits into the norm of what is being created. And what I'm so glad, like your show, and what I'm so really glad about, and what Blog Talk is doing, it opens up the possibility that we who have a certain stature, mine is the king of death, but I also have opinions about a lot of other stuff, because once you've been dead, everything else just becomes details and entertainment. And entertaining the exploration of who we are in the human physical existence and how we came into existence. And what I honestly and sincerely love about being a part of Harper Collins' brand and imprint called Harper One is they're the same people who published the Bible. And they have literally dozens and dozens and dozens of books that help to establish, support, and even possibility of refuting so much of the biblical beliefs that we hear in growing up in fundamentalism and what all churches talk about. I mean, this guy, Bart Ehrman, has a bunch of serious books, and the one I'm reading right now is Unprotected Text. And instead of Unprotected Sex, it's called Unprotected Text, and it's by what is considered one of the top 3 leading biblical scholars. And he goes into the story of the original Old Testament about Nephilims and giants and the Elohim, exactly what Zechariah talked about 50 years ago or 40 years ago. And here is a scholar, a biblical scholar, world-renowned, talking the same stuff. And he goes.
Does he have a different opinion?
No, same as Zacharias. He just doesn't quite take it that far. But why do women wear veils in churches? And why are burqas so important to Muslims? Because
no idea.
I can tell you.
Because the God said so?
No, because angels, women, human women are angels get fixated on human women. And when angels got so fixated on human women that they came and procreated and created the Nephilims, or what they call the Watchers, the giants, half God and half men, that was when God decided there should be the great flood. Now, this is biblical history. Instead of that the world needed destroyed because everybody got evil, what world had to be destroyed was God had to wipe out these half angel, half human, because they were creating control. And they were creating and dominating because they were giants, and the whole story of the 7 angels who brought fire and weaponry and how you make swords and war were not real true angels. They were hybrid angel humans.
Mm-hmm.
And this is pretty cool. I mean, for me, I get excited about reading about that stuff. I can't help it.
Well, when my new book comes out, I'll have to send you a copy because it's just right up your alley.
Well, I shall look forward to it.
Here, I'll give myself a plug since, we're going there. So
I
think it's going to be released in October, and the title is Man-Made, The Chronicles of Our Extraterrestrial Gods. And what it does is it has been this exhaustive search looking at mythology from around the world, so not just Egyptian, not just Sumerian, not just Greek, but all over the world, and lining them up side by side. Because, Dannion, you know what you find when you do that? They all tell the same story, exactly the same story. And we're just not talking the flood story. We're talking about, and it gives us actually a chronological history from the first inhabitation of this planet and moves you forward in time until the present. It's amazing. It blows my socks off.
But Rita, what's exciting about that? Think about this. The world's leading biblical scholars, not some fundamentalist preacher in backwoods Tennessee or South Carolina, but the world's leading biblical scholars, the experts, are coming to the same conclusion. Why do you think the Dead Sea Scrolls haven't been, since they were discovered, and the Nag Hammadi scrolls have not been brought to light? How come that the greatest discovery, the Dead Sea Scrolls, have not been brought to light? I can tell you why. Because they tell the same story you're telling.
Mm-hmm.
They're telling the same story. When you read this book, Unprotected Sex, and Was Jesus Really Real, which is Bart's book, because I read them both at the same time, I mean, you become utterly and absolutely amazed at how it has been translated to suit someone's sense of control. Damnation, or eternal life, based on concepts of fear as opposed to reality. Because you have realists and mythists. And what people have done with religion is they've taken the mythist point and create a value system with the realist point. Think of this. And this is really funny to me. When you go back and you read about the beginnings at the Council of Nicaea, which is where the Bible came from, 72 books in the Catholic Church and 66 books in our modern-day Bible, or the Protestants' Bible. And you read the writings of Constantine. Constantine openly and without any question believed that Jesus, or Yahshua, was the reincarnated son of Zeus, Apollo. And
that's interesting.
Oh, wait, no question. This is written and documented. And where he gave him his name is he took YH, because YHWH is Yahweh in Hebrew, and he named him YH Zeus, Z-U-E-S, Z-U-Z-S-U-E, Zeus. So that is where he got his name from, Jesus, which evolved into Jesus. And so reincarnation stayed in the Bible even through the Edict of Milan in 348, Around 500, Clement I decided to eliminate it, and it didn't get honestly taken out. The fact of reincarnation didn't get honestly taken out of the Bible until around 1000 A.D. So here we go. No such thing as reincarnation. Well, the early biblical teachings and the basis of the present-day Bible was soundly based upon the fact that Jesus was the reincarnation of Zeus's son Apollo. Where do you go with that? And if you speak it, you can literally and prove it. So what happened?
But if you say that, so let's say that is put out as Christian dogma. Let's just kind of say, okay, that's part of Christian dogma. You know, I can just hear it in my head, dang, and I live in Texas. I totally, you know, I don't buy it, but I understand the mentality, you know, where they'll say, oh, but Jesus could be reincarnated. We just can't. I mean, I can already hear that in my head.
Well, at least it means, because he could get up from the dead, too.
Right.
I mean, he could do that, too.
But you did that too, Dannion.
Yeah, well...
Maybe you're the Messiah. Well,
maybe it's like, well, I had a wound to the head, which was brain surgery, and I got up from that, so maybe I'm the Antichrist.
I've seen them little horns. No.
Well, what I do is I watch all that stuff. There's a whole section on the Internet about me being the Antichrist. I mean, I love that stuff. And when people make comments, I have like 3 names that I go in and make comments about myself because I'm always stirring it up. You know, I enjoy talking about me, and it depends on the slant that someone takes as to the slant I take, because I have more fun than anybody because I'm just one guy who went from being an utter selfish jerk to a compassionate perspective about the true value and mission of who we are and what we do on this earth. We are co-creators. Somewhere we had earned the right to have a chance to be godlike, to be co-creators, to be able to appear to be separate from everything else, and to be able to see how compassionately we can be in service to each other. And once I had that based on the Panoramic Life Review, the rest of this stuff is entertainment. And the fact that the Bible is based on the fact, the moment that someone says there's no such thing as reincarnation and that's just the work of the devil, then that means the whole Christian basis in existence is the work of the devil also. Now, I have a tendency sometimes, based on listening to ministers on television, to believe that might just be true, you know?
This is my observation. This is what I have seen from mythology, is that the most recent group of gods, namely the Zeus kind of people, came over and took control, and everybody else that was in control of the planet prior to their reign were marked as devils, and so that's why we have these evil people. But there's still a battle going on. But it's not against good and evil. It's about these 2 factions fighting for control.
Or 3 factions.
Say that again?
I believe that 3 factions. There are.
Well, yeah, 3 factions, but you know, there's still a battle for control.
Yeah, there's a physical self, a mental self, and a spiritual self, and each one of those are basically the nature of humanity. The question about humanity is physically you have terror to use people by, because physically you have pain, mentally you have attitudes to control, and spiritually you have emotions to control. So the battle is who can control as many of those 3 aspects. So far the physical side is winning, and the mental side, which is, you know, how you appreciate yourself, has gained a lot of footing with the illusions of religion and our banking system and things like that. But I can promise you that within the next 2 years, all this will go by the wayside. There'll be discoveries that will come about in both science, medicine, and archaeologically that literally will change by 214 or late 214 or early 215. everything that we believe now will mostly become nothing. It won't even be accepted by the most tight, anal retentive, ultra-conservative on the earth, because it will be so enormously real about the things that you're talking about and writing about, and the cohesiveness of how it all operates. And this all comes from the boxes of knowledge. You know, I wrote about this in Saved by the Light 17 years ago, and that book is probably still selling 10,000 books a month. And I wrote about it, and I wrote it down in 1977 as I was exploring near-death experiences. People can look at Saved by the Light now, and they can see, you know, the things that I talked about 35 years ago are happening, like on Dannion.com, this chip business. I mean, I like this. I like to see the fact that there is a spiritual dimension that understands the probable possibilities of the course of action we will take in our lives. You know, it's not that I'm a prophet or a great seer. It's that I have a good memory. And here comes this chip implant and 666, and people, this guy was on me the other day. And he said, well, if this is going to be the end times, and I've just based on the Maya, if this is going to be the end times, then where is the mark of the beast? And it says that you cannot buy, sell, or trade anything unless you bear that mark. And I started laughing. He said, why are you laughing? I said, that's very easy. Have you checked your credit score yet? And you have 3 places that has your credit score. Your credit score is 3 numbers. The place where you negotiate your ability to what price you will pay in interest on all 3 of these scores is at 666. So you cannot buy, sell, or trade, and most people who are going to hire you want to see your credit score. So all of a sudden there becomes a basis to really look at that, and if they do this chip implant, which is in the President's health care bill, and it's called a Type 2 device, and if the health care bill is passed then by the Supreme Court, it means within 36 months, and this is what it says on page 1004 and 1005 of the...
In really small print and invisible ink.
There. Yeah, but what it's done is it shifts it over. If you read 1004 and 1005, all it says is Type 2 and Type 3 devices. And then they make a reference to pacemakers. You know, this is a Type 3 device, not a Type 2 device. But then you have to go through the Health and Human Services information to see what a Type 1 and what a Type 2 and Type 3 device is, because they don't mention it in the health care bill, and you know how obsessive compulsive I am, so I'll go over and look that up. And when you look that up, the Type 2 device is an insertable device. The FDA just approved that they could put a device into your system that would regulate the medicine and feed the information back to the doctor via the telephone or by the chip or via the satellite. Well, when the health care bill is based on the fact that the IRS is the enforcer of it, they have total, absolute control of your bank account. Why the IRS instead of Health and Human Services? Because it's a way you link your entire health care system. And what will you not do to protect your parents, yourself, your children, and your grandchildren in this chipping business? And now I saw where they want to put chip implants in every child, because taking all the vaccines that children get, they are relating it to autism. Do you realize that children born after 1980, in males, you have a 1 in 22 chance that child would be autistic? And before 1980, it was usually 1 in 10,000. And now it's 1 in every 188, and soon it'll be 1 in every 22. That is an absolute monumental health crisis.
I mean, I could see them pitching the implant, like they pitched it for your animal. Keep it so that if your child is abducted, I remember when my kids were in elementary school and they were doing that whole fingerprinting thing, just in case your child is abducted, and my husband was thinking about doing it, and I'm like, are you crazy?
No
and he goes,
way.
why? I go, because now your child's fingerprints are in the system, and I go, God forbid. I mean, this sounds bad. I go, but God forbid they do something bad. They'll have their fingerprints. They'll be knocking on our door. No.
Or God forbid that they decide they want to implement something and they have your name and your fingerprint.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm with you, Rita. Look, I see the good side of it because look at dementia and Alzheimer's patients and people who wander off and children who run away and, marking this because people don't realize that the new money that came out, the new 20s, they don't do it with 10s and 5s, but every place you can track where from the moment you put that money in your pocket, every place you spend any money can be tracked. Every dollar you spend can be tracked. Okay? So when you start looking at the world of in the Maya's concept of looking at the world of everything is connected, the unity connection, these things that are done, which are the control based on the three factions that fight for control of the identity of who we spiritually are, not any other identity. Because once you have a spiritual identity of yourself, much like I have gained through going through these near-death experiences, all that stuff is just ridiculous. You would not be chipping me. I don't want to hear it. I'm not dealing with it, and I don't care what goes wrong with me or any of that. I'm not going through all that. But once you realize that these are controlling factions, then the unity concept based on the Maya becomes even more real and more valuable as we look at 2012. Because if somebody says, well, Dannion, what do you think is going to happen? I said, well, without having to go through all that, solar flares are our biggest issue, number one. But number two, think about if they turned electricity off for 3 months, where would you be? If they're going to if the electricity was off at your city or within 500 miles of where you live, where would you be? And if you think that, you have every implication and every concept and precept necessary to formulate a strategy to protect yourself. Because look what happened just the other week, Rita. They had a solar flare.
Was it a quote-unquote solar flare?
It shot out into the space 2 million miles. And the plasma radiation that what's called a plasma flare, because too many people know what solar flare means. But the plasma array spread out, and the neutrino bombardment of our atmosphere affected rainfall. Because they have discovered that you can measure cosmic energy and solar flares by looking at tachyon and neutrinos, which are subatomic particles. And you realize that these neutrinos in cloud formations are creating a new series of cloud formations that hold more moisture. And that's why we see so much flooding around the world today. That's how these changes in transitional events and the typical 11-year cycle of solar activity are now beginning to affect us, because we're at the end of one era and we're entering a new one. And that's why these kind of conversations can be had. If someone wanted to try to discredit me, they're going to have to discredit astrophysics. They're going to have to discredit DNA and RNA. They're going to have to discredit the fact that the world's leading authorities have gone through and created this paradigm. And it wasn't just one biblical scholar. It's like 20 of them. They come to the same conclusion you just came to. They even use the same names. The Watchers from the Old Testament, they called them Nephilims. Zechariah took from the old Hindu text, the old Indus Valley text, they called them the Anunnaki. But the description of the Anunnaki in the ancient text and the description in the Bible, it is the exact same description. So it's like you said, if you put it all side by side, everybody comes up with the same conclusions. There is only one group. There's only one group that doesn't come up with the same conclusions, and that's the Aborigines.
I differ with that, to be honest with you, Dannion.
Well, good.
They have a lot of stories that are the same.
Right, but they have an older oral history. Their oral history is about 1 million years, and we don't have anything that relates to that.
Right, but their stories... All right, hang on. So there is... Hang on. Give me one quick second. I'll just share one little tidbit of something that I discovered. So as an example, Thor, you know who Thor is from Greek or Norse mythology, has his mighty hammer, okay? And Thor can take his mighty hammer and throw it and destroy whatever he throws it at, and it will automatically return to him. That's part of the magic of the weapon. And it's called an axe, and it's called a club, and it's called a bunch of different things. Now, the Australians have something that is called the woomerang, we call boomerang, which is a weapon that you can throw and comes back to you. And it's also identified as something that will annihilate whatever is in its path.
Yeah, destroy its enemy.
Right. But what's interesting is that the Australians talk about the Wakari brothers who come down, and there's this one god who is trying to have sex with the women of the earth, and they lay him in ambush, and they castrate him with this boomerang. Now, a very similar tale is told of Kronos castrating Uranus, who is trying to have relations with Gaia Earth, and they used a sickle, which looks just like a boomerang. Now, you start laying them together that way, and you see that they're really telling the same story and talking about the same kinds of weapons. You know, and it's just fascinating.
It's darned exciting is what it is, Rita. It's exciting because it still comes back.
It's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing.
But it still comes back that we have a central origin.
Yes.
We have a unique central origin, okay? And with that unique simple origin, which now used to be Africa or wherever the Garden of Eden was, but there comes back to the beginning of where did we all come from? Lemuria, Mu, Atlantis, Guslan from the book Saga. We have a central origin because each of these mythologies took on a regional context based on what we had from an ancient lore or from the passing down of stories, mythologies, and legends. I think it's exciting.
I think it's exciting, too.
I can't wait to read this book, girl.
Well, you're going to love it because it just tells the stories like, the gods were all screwing each other, and then they were kicking each other's butts. I mean, it goes through a lot of mythology, but it does it in a light-hearted way.
But that's how we have to tell the stories. People enjoy storytelling. And with a sense of humor, they remember what to laugh about, and that's how they capture and control the information that's being passed on to them, Rita. I mean, I have a new book. I think it comes out next year. I never know when they do it. It's called 10 Things to Know Before You Go. Aspire to inspire before you expire. And it's taken from being at the bedside of 2,000 people. I've been with 2,005 people leaving this world and 422 taking their last breath. And what you realize is there are basically 10 common things that people deal with when they're in transition. And in those common things, I wanted to, why wait till the end of your life to deal with them when you can incorporate them in your life today? And as you move down that path toward transition, you don't live in fear and terror and lose control of your life. You empower who you are, and you lose the fear, and you bring back that compassionate freedom that what that knowledge gives each of us. And this book comes out in October. Shouldn't I get an advance copy?
Was that a question to me?
Yes.
So it comes out in October?
That's what you said.
Oh.
About your book.
Yes.
So I'm trying to figure out how to get an advance copy.
Of course. I'm going to add you to the list. I thought you were talking about your book. You know, I was like, wait,
no,
I thought you said next year.
Who knows?
Of course.
Who knows when they put it out? But, you know, I'd love to stir up some trouble with it.
Oh, well, this book stirs up trouble because I get into the Bible and I just am, you know, like I talk about the book of Revelation, like, you know, the way that I phrase it is like, there are angels flying around everywhere, you know.
Well, think about it. Whatever John was taking when he wrote the book of Revelation, he was either taking a little too much or not quite enough of whatever it was he was taking that day. I mean, you know anybody that sees 10-headed dragons, you know, that boy's got a buzz.
Actually, my observation is that he is retelling old myth. He's not printing a new table on the story or a new story on the table. He's retelling old myth.
And it wasn't John.
And I'm just going to leave it there, huh?
Well, when did Revelations? Revelations was written roughly 76 years after John's passing. I mean, you know, you have to look at it historically. You're somewhere around 70 years. You're around close to 100 AD when that book came into existence. And you look at how many times this has been rewritten.
Well, I mean, it's actually a kind of hard book to read because it really jumps all over the place, and just following the narrative is challenging.
Well, you need to drink a little liquor. That's your problem. You need to get to about a half a pint. It would make sense if you had about a half a pint of moonshine in you. It would make perfect sense, I promise. Because when you read it, it's like talking to a really smart drunk person.
Maybe a little ayahuasca mixed in. That'll all be good.
I think they did. Well, I think the lotus was their big thing back in those days. You know, dried lotus was the big thing.
Dannion, we have about a minute left. Any last words for the listeners today?
Well, I would love for people to go to Dannion.com. I'm going to the Yucatan. I'm going to the Yucatan for the 2012. It's in October. I'd like people that if they look at the story and look at where I'm going to believe, because they've opened up a new Mayan site and have an old one, and it's a boat cruise, because that way everybody would get taken care of. It's really inexpensive. But people to come to Dannion.com and come live in my world and spend some time in my world. Because I am faced, just like all of us, we have to face these issues head on and make the true difference. And the other thing is, I'd like to tell everybody to tell at least 3 of their friends how great you are, Rita, and how absolutely fabulous and smart a person you are, and to ask them to support and to listen to your radio show. Because it's word of mouth. Blog Talk is, there's good guys, and it's word of mouth that grows us. And I just look forward to, I always like to do your show, and I always appreciate to see that you're really smart and that you're spiritually based in what you're trying to get across. You're trying to break down the old taboos and mores, and I am thankful.
Thank you, Dannion. I promise I won't let my head get too big.
Oh, but you deserve that because you manage it well.
I am going to take that little piece and make my husband listen to it over and over and over again. No.
I'll put him on or I'll call him on the phone.
Okay.
I'll tighten him up for you, honey.
He's a good guy. Actually, he's helping me write the book. So He's a keeper, Dannion.
Oh, I agree with that 100%. But sometimes you take some things for granted, and you forget how much you appreciate and support.
Well, there's the music, which means we need to go. So, Dannion, thank you. And you're always welcome back on. Just have your peeps contact me, okay?
Thank you. Love you and love your audience.
Love you too. Bye, Dannion.
Bye, Rita.
That was Dannion Brinkley. His webpage is dannion.com. Please do check it out. His other website is www.thetwilightbrigade.com. Next week, we're going to have Keith Blanchard on talking about what do you love? So until next week, I'm Dr. Rita Louise. This is Just Energy Radio. Be blessed.
Join host Dr. Rita Louise each week at this time for Just Energy Radio. Point your browser to www.justenergyradio.com for more show information and to contact Dr. Rita.